Yes, my friends, things are heating up around the Denver Broncos, and after what we just saw against the Atlanta Falcons, there are some important things we need to talk about. We know expectations are extremely high in Denver right now, and man, I want to see this team in the Super Bowl. I know a lot of Broncos fans have that same dream, and why not believe it can happen this season? Denver just dominated Atlanta 24-0 in the first half, and they did it without Bo Nix, Marvin Mims Jr., and J.K. Dobbins on the field. But what really caught my attention was the depth of this team. Jonah Coleman looked powerful. Courtland Sutton made incredible catches, and this defense was creating pressure and taking the football away. So I want to know which part impressed you the most. Was it the offense, showing it can still move the ball without some of its biggest weapons? Or was it a defense that held Atlanta to only 28 yards and 1 first down in the entire first half? Write your opinion below, and if you've been a Denver Broncos fan for more than 15 years, hit that like button hard, because Broncos country, after a performance like this, we need to talk about just how dangerous this team could become. So let's get into it. Now, Broncos country, we have to start with the overall picture because this was about as impressive of a first half as Denver could have asked for. The Broncos went into halftime leading Atlanta 24-0, and the numbers explain exactly how one-sided this game had become. Denver had 11 first downs, compared with only 1 for Atlanta. The Broncos had 167 total yards, while the Falcons had only 28. Denver had 45 rushing yards, compared with just 6 for Atlanta. That is not simply winning a half of football. That is controlling practically everything that is happening on the field. And remember who was not playing. Bo Nix did not play. According to what we saw before the game, he had a strong workout, and his ankle looked fine. But Denver did not want to put him behind a 4-string center. Calvin Throckmorton stepped in, and even under those circumstances, Denver's offense was able to move the football. Marvin Mims Jr. was not out there. J.K. Dobbins was not playing either. Yet Denver's offense still looked comfortable, organized, and dangerous. There was another interesting change on the sideline. Sean Payton was no longer handling the offensive play-calling duties in this game, and there were moments where the cameras showed him talking with officials while the offense operated. That made the performance even more interesting because the Broncos did not look like an offense trying to figure things out. They looked prepared, and one player who immediately demanded attention was Jonah Coleman. Broncos fans, Coleman looked powerful. The combination of his quick cuts, speed, and strength stood out almost immediately. What impressed me most was not simply that he could run hard. It was the way he seemed to understand where the run needed to go. There were plays where he hit the hole quickly while still showing patience. On one run, something that appeared blocked for around 7 yards became an easy first down because Coleman kept working through the play. He also showed that he can contribute in different situations. We saw him catch the football. We saw him work in pass protection, something that was already expected to translate from his time at Washington. But the biggest thing was watching him put his foot into the ground and attack the middle instead of automatically trying to bounce everything outside. That gives Denver another style in the backfield. R.J. Harvey has tremendous athletic ability and can be dangerous catching the football and getting outside. Coleman showed something different. He was willing to see traffic in front of him, make one decisive cut, and go straight through the middle. On one of his runs, it initially looked like he might have nowhere to go. Instead of immediately escaping toward the sideline, he planted his foot, cut inside, and turned the play into a first down. That is exactly why this running back situation can become so interesting.
Think about the different possibilities Denver has with J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, and Jonah Coleman. Dobbins gives the Broncos a back who can do a little bit of everything. Coleman showed his ability as a blocker and an inside runner. Harvey brings his receiving ability and athleticism on the outside. If Denver can rotate those different styles, the Broncos have a chance to keep the running backs fresh while forcing defenses to prepare for several different threats. And that matters because the running game can open up everything else. One example came with Pat Bryant. There has been plenty of attention around Bryant, and one of his routes showed exactly why. Denver used play action, and Bryant ran a beautiful route where his ability to drop his hips and stop quickly created immediate separation. He went from being covered to suddenly having a pocket of space for the quarterback to find him. That type of route does not need to look complicated to be effective. Bryant sold what he was doing, stopped on a dime, and created room. It was exactly the type of play that can become extremely useful when a defense also has to respect Denver's running game. The Broncos had moved away from some of that play-action approach last season, particularly when the running back situation was not healthy. But with the different options Denver now has in the backfield, this is something that could become a much bigger part of what the offense wants to do. Then we have to talk about Courtland Sutton. Any concerns about Sutton certainly did not show up in this performance. On the opening drive, he reminded everyone exactly what makes him so difficult to defend. One catch in particular was ridiculous. Sutton went up and made a one-handed grab with his left hand, even though he is right-handed. The defender was right there, but Sutton used his size and his ability at the catch point to make the play anyway. And that was not the only time he made his presence felt. Later came the deep shot. Jarrett Stidham had time in the pocket, Sutton got down the field, and once again he did what Broncos fans have seen him do so many times, he went up and got the football. But there was something else happening on that play that made it even more encouraging. Pat Bryant was open and appeared to have a clear path toward the end zone. At the same time, Evan Engram was drawing enormous attention in the middle of the field, with 3 Atlanta defenders around him. That is the part of the play that should excite Broncos fans beyond Sutton's catch. Defenses have decisions to make. If Engram is pulling defenders into the middle, somebody else gets space. If Bryant continues creating separation, he has to be respected. And if a defense decides it can leave Sutton in a one-on-one situation, Sutton has already shown what can happen. Denver's opening drive was a great example of how all of these pieces can work together. It covered 69 yards and produced 4 first downs. Think about this, the Broncos' starting offense recorded more first downs on that opening possession than Atlanta produced during the entire first half. That tells you how complete Denver's control really was. The defense was just as impressive, although there was one strange consequence of playing so well. Sean Payton wanted the starters to get around 15 plays, but Atlanta struggled so badly to sustain drives that it took a long time for Denver's defense to reach that number. Atlanta managed only 1 first down over its first 4 possessions. The Broncos' defense kept getting the Falcons off the field. Most importantly, Denver did something that Sean Payton has emphasized as the difference between being a great defense and becoming an elite defense, creating takeaways. We already knew Denver could rush the passer. What this defense wants to add is the ability to consistently turn pressure into possession of the football. And the pressure against Atlanta was relentless. Jonathan Cooper showed once again how quickly he can get into the backfield. On one play, Atlanta appeared to have the protection in position, but before the quarterback could comfortably react, Cooper was already bearing down on him. Nick Bonitto was right there as well. That is the nightmare Denver can create. It is difficult enough dealing with one dangerous pass rusher. When pressure is arriving from multiple places, the quarterback